Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our conversation with the producers of White Boy Rick, the 2018 film starring Matthew McConaughey, filmed almost entirely here in Cleveland, Ohio. My name is John Wagner, and I'm the vice chairman of the board of the Greater Cleveland Film Commission. And before we get started tonight, I'd like to just tell you briefly about our mission here at the GCFC. We are a nonprofit with a staff of just 6 people who work tirelessly to help bring productions here to Cleveland. They scout locations. They provide crew members to these productions. They lobby for more incentives to get us more productions here in Cleveland. They help educate through programs both online and in person to help Clevelanders on the skills it takes to work in this industry. And again, our staff does all this with just 6 people. So what does this mean for our city? It means jobs. Jobs all across the economic spectrum. Jobs that really fit what we're all about here in Cleveland, Ohio. Union labor jobs in various aspects of production. Accounting jobs, tech jobs, jobs that can and have helped Clevelanders get into this industry full time. And those are just the jobs created directly by film in Cleveland. When production comes to our area, hotels, restaurants, small businesses, they all benefit as well. In the age of COVID, we need these areas to come back faster than just about anything. And film is what is going to make that happen. In fact, for every dollar the state of Ohio spends to incent films to come to our area, $3 are generated in return for our economy. So the people who come here from out of town, the people on our call tonight, they are the filmmakers. We at the Film Commission are the job creators. Now, as I said, we're a nonprofit. We do not get paid when these productions come here. Our survival and our ability to make all of this possible is based strictly on the help we get from our local partners and people like yourselves. So please consider helping us out tonight by going to the link you see on your screen and making a donation to the Greater Cleveland Film Commission. Every penny you give increases our ability to bring film and jobs to Greater Cleveland. That's our mission, our goal, and the ultimate reason we need your help. It's simply to have a full-time film industry here in Cleveland, Ohio, year-round. And I promise you, we are closer than ever, even in the time of COVID, to making that happen. And you tonight can help us do that. Thank you. Now, the fun part. I'd like to turn things over to our host. No one in this area is more qualified to lead a discussion like the one we're about to have than my friend Mike Wendt. Mike is a producer, director, and a location manager and scout. His current role with us at the Film Commission is as our production coordinator. And thus, he has worked on such films as Captain America, the Winter Soldier, My Friend Dahmer, and fittingly, White Boy Rick. His first feature-length documentary was The End of the World as We Knew It, about the former 107.9 The End radio station, which was so formative to people in my age group here in Cleveland. He's currently in post-production on a second feature-length doc called Robert Banks. We'll talk about that later. And now it's my pleasure to begin tonight's conversation by turning the microphone over to Mike Wendt. Mike.
Thank you so much for that intro, John. I am very excited to do this tonight, and I brought my White Boy Rick swag jacket here. Just because it was something that it was, the spring of 2017 was a great time to work on that film, and I am very happy right now to introduce our guests. So first up, we have Mr. Scott Franklin, and he is a New York native, and he studied at Ohio State. He returned to New York on an unpaid associate producer's position on the film Pi, which started a great collaboration with Darren Aronofsky, and obviously, worked on Pi, The Wrestler, and was nominated for an Academy Award for producing Black Swan. Next up, we have Georgia Kacandes, and I'm sorry, I don't know why I messed up that, but so Georgia is a native of New York, and she went to NYU. She is the former president of physical production at Paramount Pictures, and she has worked with some of the, you know, the most regarded filmmakers: Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, and also Steven Soderbergh. And then last but not least, we have Matthew Krul, who is a native from Dayton, Ohio. He has produced over 400 hours of television. He has filmed projects in over 10 different countries, and he has production um, companies that are based in LA, Ohio, and Spain. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here with us. I have to just first ask this question because I think a lot of times when talking about producing, there's always a slight confusion as to what exactly does a producer do. So I have to throw it out, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this, but whoever's ready first, tell us what does a producer do?
Scott, you go first.
Everything. There's a lot of jobs, and that's, it's the one job I see, or that you all see in film, where there's you see so many of them, and you say, why are there so many producers? And it really is because we do have to wear many different hats. From developing the content, developing the screenplay, and sometimes finding the director, or sometimes developing it with the writer and the director, casting the talent, overseeing the budget process, doing the budget, creating the budget and schedule, finding the funds to make the movie, and putting it all together, hiring everybody, obviously in conjunction with the rest of the creative team, the director, the writer, the executive producers, financiers. But it's a really all-encompassing job, and it's really also a matter of filling in and picking up wherever something is needed to be picked up. Your job is done as well as possible when you have less fires to put out. But the goal is to get as much done as you can in pre-production, so that when you get to production, you're free and you have the headspace to put out the fires and deal with the problems that arise, because they always do. I'll let Georgia and Matthew add to that if they have anything.
Yeah, I think there's when you come together with a group of producers, everybody just works to their strong suit. So like with this one, we did have issues with the script up until last minute. We had casting issues with trying to find Richie, who, was the needle in a haystack. And then we had issues dealing with, just getting permission to do a few things in Cleveland that Matthew and his connections were incredibly helpful with. So, everybody sort of used their strengths to get us in good shape. And we actually had a pretty smooth production.
I mean, I can add a little bit of that, but I agree with of course, Scott and Georgia as being, amazing producers in their craft and also very well respected. I think it's basically, from my experience, is being a Swiss Army knife, and sometimes being a producer is definitely not as glorified as it is on the ground, because you really are doing everything possible to support the team, support the director, and sometimes you're getting your hands dirty, and sometimes you're working late nights, and it's a really beautiful process when you have producers and that are collaborative, and that's how we got this experience. I think it was just a great team effort, and everybody really worked hard, and it was great. But yeah, I think basically being a producer is just being there for everybody else and making sure that you can be a problem solver and no ego and just get things done, and hopefully you get a good result, which I think that we did on this film.
And what was it about this particular project? I guess this is a two-part question, but what was it about this particular project that attracted you, and what brought you all together collectively to this project?
It's so many things that that attracted us, me and I think all of us, to this project. And I think it really started with, Rick Wershe himself, and hearing his story and realizing you read this script and there are multiple versions of the script and you read all of them. They're all so moving and tragic. And you realize that it's true, that here's this guy who got, arrested when he was 16, 17 years old. And at the time of making the film was still in prison, and he was, 40. The guy spent, the better part of his teenage years and his adult life in prison for, nonviolent crime. So that's one of the things. And then when I finally spoke to and met the guy, it was so, obvious and so clear that he didn't belong behind bars. He never committed a violent act. He's in the wrong place at the wrong time. He just helped put away the wrong people in some politicians and some powerful people's friends, and in the wrong time of this country's history, where they had the where they had laws that have since been repealed and sentencing guidelines that have since been repealed, and he should have been resentenced and wasn't. And and then you team up with a director like Yan and another producer like John Lesher, who's not here. He wasn't able to join us. He's in Japan at the moment. But you put the right team of people together, and you bring in Georgia and Matthew, who originally turned me on to the material and the story. And you just realize that this is a film that had to be made and a story that had to be told.
And now all of you, have worked with directors that, are just some of the best in the industry. What, I guess, sticking with just the White Boy Rick right now, but what was it about Yan that told you all as producers that this was the right person to direct this film?
I can tell a funny story about that, and then I'll let Scott jump in there. But I think we were at Sundance, Scott and I have been friends prior for years before him and I got a chance to work together. And so when I got the script through my attorney, I fell in love with it. And for me, to answer the question prior, was just the injustice of the situation. So that's what made me fall in love with it. Just the fact that the story needed to be told. And if we could shine any light with, any power that we have as filmmakers or media to be able to shed light on this story would be, just in my mind. So long story short, I was with Scott in Sundance, and I was bugging him the whole trip. Like, man, you got to take a look at this thing, man. It's great. It's great. And he said, all right, great. We'll talk about it after our meeting that I have at this restaurant. So we sat there at the restaurant, and at the time I didn't even know. So literally Yen walks up to the bar, the first time I met him, and it's me, Scott, and Yen talking about another project. And then, Scott and I all hang out, we have a great night, we become friends. And then like 2 weeks later, Scott, gets really excited about the project. And then at the same time, Yen, which unbeknownst to us, had already kind of been tapped, to be involved in the project. So it was funny that synergy already happened. And then Scott can finish up the story from there.
That really summed it up. But, when he was attached to a different White Boy Rick project, which we all ended up joining forces together. And, it was interesting that we approached him about ours, and he was already attached to another one. But, getting to know Yan and his moral compass and the type of person he is, you knew he'd have the right feeling about the story and his previous work. I mean, I don't know if anybody who's here has seen the original, the first series that he directed, Top Boy, which was in London. It was so phenomenal and authentic street people and it mixed, with real actors, but it was just so raw and real and authentic and gritty. And that was just something that, that felt like needed to be brought to this story.
That's great. Now, a lot of the Rick story is in the city of Detroit, and obviously for various reasons, the state of Michigan doesn't have film incentives, so that probably left you as producers figuring out where to shoot the film. So how did how did Ohio come on your radar for this project?
Well, we actually scouted both Detroit and Cleveland kind of at the same time, knowing that because they had because the incentive for Cleveland was there, that we would go to Cleveland because financially we needed the boost. But it was surprising what a good match it is. I mean, there are the neighborhoods that we shot in that have, the economic, devastation that, is the neighborhood that Rick lived in and grew up in Detroit. And everything is there. I mean, Cleveland is a great town to shoot in because the architecture is amazing. You have every period. Stefania Sella, who was our designer, would say to me, I could bring every movie here. There's so much great architecture, and there's a lot of available buildings. So you can, so we were able to basically, at a certain point when, I'm getting a little off topic, but when we were, we had to cut our budget, and we just said, you know what, it was Scott's idea, and I would have never thought to do this, but he was like, let's just cut our construction costs, let's just not build anything because the architecture is here. And we have to, shoot in practical locations anyway. And it was the smartest thing we did. And we were able to really, chop a big part of our budget out because Cleveland has everything that Detroit had. And I actually don't think we ended up with much of Detroit in the final cut anyway. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer. And I agree with Stefania. There was, it was very easy to shoot there. The police were very cooperative. I mean, everybody gave us a lot of leeway, and we shot in we shot in East Cleveland, and we never had problems. We never had security problems. People were happy to have us there, except for some of the drug blocks we were trying to shoot on. But we figured that out, we left. But from the casino, which was the hugest win for us, to the hospital, to the all the various neighborhoods, you really have a lot of freedom there, and it was a great place to shoot. I think much easier than Detroit would have been, because it's a little more condensed. So
Sure. Now, I get, for a lot of times there are a lot of discussions, that we have with the commission and sometimes with the folks at the state, about the importance of tax incentives. So as producers, why are tax incentives so important to help get your films made?
I mean, look, it's no secret that the movie industry is not making, and films aren't grossing at box office the same as they were, say, even 15, 20 years ago, and with the introduction of a lot of the streamers and whatnot. I mean, budgets have gone down drastically. Rates haven't come down with it. They've gone the other way and gone up, and to get a film made, nobody wants to see you take things off the page, very rarely. I mean, the audience's appetite for quality has only gotten better, and the audiences have gotten much smarter as far as film goers. So, without tax incentives, I don't know how you can, in this day and age of squeezed budgets, larger creative appetites, smarter audiences, and less box office. Without the help of tax credits, I don't think there would be many films. I mean, it's extremely, extremely rare that you hear of a movie that got made without the benefit of any tax credits these days. I mean, if you're in a state that doesn't offer films tax credits, and you want to be in the film business, you might as well move. It's not possible, unfortunately. It would be nice if it was, but that's just the reality of today's world.
Yeah. So we're already starting to get some questions, which is amazing. So remember, there is a Q&A button below. And so somebody had, and I apologize, I'm not sure who asked this, but they're saying, at what point does a producer come into a project? And I mean, do you get hired into a project, or is it something that is kind of organic and grown, you know, from your own, like kind of one of your own babies or something?
I think it varies from project to project and producer to producer. I mean, I've been both. I've been, you know, producer for hire on films that were ready to go and financed and almost fully cast. And I've been there from the ground up as, you know, the writer was putting the pen to the page. So, you know, it varies for me anyway. Georgia and Matthew speak for themselves.
Yeah, I usually just jump in for physical production. I like to jump in when there's a checkbook available already.
I envy you on that one, Georgia.
No fundraising, no development. I just like to, you know, they usually just bring me in when they know they're going to make the movie. And I mean, I do a lot of budgets and plans for things that never happen or things that happen in a different time than I can do them. But yeah, it's for me, it's, these guys have already done the work. They've gotten the rights. They've, you know, worked the script. They've cast. Usually, the director is, you know, is hired before I am because he has to, or he or she has to like me and want me to run the show for them for the production period. So
Possible not to.
Yeah.
No, but I agree as well with Scott and Georgia too. I think most importantly, I think the perfect marriage or perfect storm is to have that. Well, you need the tax incentive 100%, like Scott said, and Georgia. It's just in this time and place in the world, you know, because of the climate, you know, it's just very difficult to do it without. But to have the perfect marriage of some place like Ohio, which, you know, we were very lucky to have, that you have the marriage of the tax incentive and also the fact that it matched for the shoot in so many different levels, from, as Georgia stated, the crew, locations. Stefania was amazing, and it just worked out perfectly. So that's the best case scenario, when you can have that, when you actually have the incentives that match the location versus forcing something. So hopefully we can continue to support and advocate for or lobby for, you know, tax incentives, as you know, you said in the beginning of this, you know, $1, you know, matches times 3 in the multiple. I mean, it makes sense. And I think for my experience on that too, the local community in Ohio and being from Ohio, you know, it was so nice because the communities really enjoyed us being there. You know, me, Scott, and Georgia, and the whole crew and the cast, we'd eat at all the local restaurants. We had so much fun. You know, we really got to be part of the community. And I think, you know, in spending money and having fun and going out, you know, when we had time, which was not much, but when we did, it was nice. So I think we saw that firsthand, the effect of actually giving back to the community. And I hope that was received well from our side. But yes, it's very important.
Absolutely. Now we have one of these questions is from Gail Schwartz, who asked, and you know, I'm sure this might be one of those kind of softball questions, but how did each of you get involved in the industry?
Ooh, who can remember?
I guess I'll do mine first. I started when I'll try to make mine brief, but I think I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and my mom was a singer and at local community theater, like nothing crazy, school teacher. But I always grew up with my mom singing and kind of acting and fun stuff. And I think my parents took me to Universal Studios when I was a young kid out to Hollywood. And I might have been 5 or 7. I don't know, my mom will kill me if I don't get this right, but they put me on stage, or I raised my hand and I was up on stage and I was acting in something. I forget what it was. I'm sure I have pictures, which I would not have submitted for the embarrassment. And so I did my first acting when I was super young, and I just fell in love with film. And at that time I wanted to be an actor and had wild dreams. So I moved out to Hollywood when I was 18, and I did become an actor. Not a very good one, but I had some fun. And once I got tired of the no's, I was like, well, who makes the right decisions? And they're like, well, the producers usually do it. I said, well, then I want to be a producer. So I kind of transitioned very slowly into that. And then kind of did the traditional route of being an personal assistant to a producer and writer in Malibu for years. And then slowly started my own company. And then we started to develop some IP. And then I got a great internship with Peter Gruber at Mandalay Entertainment, who was an icon for me. So I learned from one of the best kind of mini studio heads and just kind of was a sponge in my early 20s and just learned as much as I could. and then started trying to develop stuff and started shooting some short films. And then slowly but surely I got some success. I hit a few bumps in the road, and then I kind of gave it up for a little bit. I think it was 2008 when the writer's strike hit, and we had like a lot of projects going forward, and we lost all of our funding and all of our films. And I kind of, you know, as we all do, and I assure that Scott and Georgia have had the same situations, where you just kind of reevaluate your life. And I took a break without turning the story into too long. So I took a break and moved away, and then I started another business and tried to do something else. But I guess it's like once you get bit by the bug, it's hard to leave. So, you know, I had no choice. I said, I'm not happy doing anything else. So I came back, and then I started from scratch again, and then kind of rebuilt my career. And then, you know, now luckily enough, I got to work with Scott and Georgia, and that was it. So, I mean, you know, I didn't give up is my point. So now we're sitting here, you know, having this great conversation, and we made a great movie. And so you never know. So never give up. But that was kind of my journey, hitting a lot of hurdles, but staying in there. And, you know, you have to have passion for this business, and you have to love it, because otherwise it's a very tough business to be in. But if you love it, you have fun, and you get bumps and bruises, but it's worth it for me. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
Georgia? Me? Me? You know, I got my passion for the film industry when I was a young age too, and it really came from my dad, who was turned me into an avid movie fan and moviegoer, to the point where he would, you know, I'd be in third grade, and you know, he'd pull me out of school and say I had a doctor's appointment, and he'd take me to the movies, and then the next day he'd pull me out of school again and say I had a dentist appointment, and we were at the movies. I mean, I loved going to the movies as a kid, so it was something I always wanted to do. You know, I went to school. You know, I went to college. I didn't even know anything about film school. I grew up in Long Island. It wasn't really a common thing for people to do where I came from. I went to great Ohio State University, and then as soon as I finished there, I just moved straight out to Los Angeles. Long story short, I found myself back in New York, working for free on Pi as an assistant to the producer. And it was just one of those things. It was a no-budget movie. And I was learning how to be a producer. I was really young, 22, 23 years old. And, you know, it just, you know, part of producing, we had no money. So, you know, my first day there, second day there, third day, we just had a checklist of all the things that we needed to figure out how to get for free. And they were trucking. It was, you know, large vats of computer parts to build the set, and all these different things that we needed. And it just so happened, being from New York and just family, I'd made a phone call to Uncle Al, and who owns a trucking company. And, you know, my second day on the job, I showed up with 2 trucks. You know, the next day I called an aunt who was an administrator at SUNY Old Westbury, and I asked if they had old computer parts. I said, oh, they just upgraded their whole thing. So I took one of those trucks, and they were about to send them in to be recycled, and I took them all. And day 2, I showed up with 2 trucks and a truckload of computer parts. So it's just, you know, and then it just kept snowballing like that, and became the associate producer, and became tight with you know, the filmmakers there, Darren and Eric and Maddie, and it became family. And Pi won Best Director, and at Sundance we made it for I think $84,000, and we sold it for $1 million. And it continued working with them and growing and learning, and you know, stayed with them, you know, ever since. You know, minus a few other, you know, projects on the side.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it all spirals. Yeah, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Studied literature, spent a year at school in England, and then at BU for a year, and then I dropped out. And it was just like, my dad was very academically oriented, and I just said, I can't do it. I don't know what I want to do. So I just moved to Manhattan and started working at a newspaper, Soho News, and then met a guy who was at NYU Film School. And before I knew it, because my parents lived in White Plains, I was driving the crew to every shoot. I was doing, you know, exactly what Scott's saying. It's like, what do we need? Oh, we need this. You need to cook the food for, you know, craft service. You need to cook the food for camera. You know, this guy was using me as an actress, which was, you know, can't even believe that he was able to make a movie with me. But anyway, so I learned a lot, and we did all of his friends' films and stuff like that. And at the same time, because my elementary school was near IBM, their headquarters, they gave us Selectric typewriters. So I learned how to type when I was like 9 years old. And so I was a very fast, very, very impressive typist. And so that led me into working in the production office. So when I started to work, I came up as a assistant coordinator and a coordinator. And then eventually I made a decision to work with auteur directors. It was in the early 80s, and those were the films that just fed my brain. I mean, I'd always loved film, and my father was like Scott's father, except that he would just take us to a movie and it didn't matter what time it started. Like sometimes we get there, it'd be like 10 minutes before the movie was over. We just sit there and wait for it we'd watch the end. And I mean, it was so crazy, but he loved movies, and too.
How many
And so
times
did
did
I.
you,
And
how many times
so
did
it
you wait
just,
for another one to start in the same theater?
so many times. And he would, the worst thing is that most of the time he would just take a nap, and then there were 6 kids. So we just all sit there, waiting for the movie to be like, oh, did we see this part before? It was fun. But yeah, but I learned, it's an experiential job. You have to do it in order to learn it. So, the film school is great because you get a chance to really work on a lot of different productions, tiny little ones where you don't have any, finances. And then, as things grow and you get a little bit more money, you get comfortable in a certain bracket. And then before you know it, like I went from doing Steven Soderbergh's Underneath for $8 million, and then all of a sudden worked on Casino, which was a $45 million movie at the time. So things, your career just kind of takes, I think if you're good at what you do, it just kind of takes you along. And every experience is new, and you learn something new. And I didn't say this before, but one of the things I loved about this movie was working with John and Scott and Matthew and Yan, because Yan is so passionate. And for me, that is what gets you through at the end of the day. I mean, I know a lot of people are turned on by money. So if you're getting a big paycheck and you're working on a big movie and, whatever it is. But for me, it's always been about like, if you can connect creatively with this group, and you can, put the practical and the creative together in a way, that matches, that is right and coherent, then you can make a great movie. And no matter how hard it gets, if there's passion behind it, you'll get through it, and you'll be proud of it at the end of the day too. So
That's amazing. Now, I kind of going along with that, it seems to be like producer is one of those positions is that there's not really any like framework as to or like a proper path to get there. Is there? I mean, for potentially some of the younger people who are in our audience who are thinking about going that producer's route, is there some kind of positions that you suggest that they take in order to get to that level, or is it kind of one of those things where you have to just kind of start doing it?
I think it's, look, like anything else and like nothing else really in this industry, the path to producing is, I mean, everybody you talk to, has their own unique path, I think. And I think a lot of it is, getting in there and learning. You can start off as an assistant. You can start off as a PA. You can dive right in. You can come from the short form world, the music video commercial world. Even now, I mean, now more so than ever, you've got, there's so many platforms to produce content and just learn how to create, great material. I mean, just from YouTube and TikTok. And I mean, there's so many, places that talent gets discovered. So, I have to imagine now that there's even more creative paths than the ones that were available to us when we started out. I mean, the first producer I worked for, took the producing course at AFI and went to film school to become a producer. But, there's so many different hats you wear as a producer and different types of producers that there's really just so many different courses. And I think, if we're talking to an audience of young filmmakers that live in Cleveland, there's no shortage at least when there's a production, there's no shortage of a need for local, for local labor. And I think you can get onto local films and you can learn. But I think it's not only about that. I think you've got to combine that with, figuring out how to create your own content, and not just the short form YouTube stuff, but try to figure out how to create something long form. I mean, the thing also is, when we first started out, the only way to make a movie was with a film camera and big lights and film and processing and all this stuff. I mean, now you can make a film on a camera that costs $500 and you can edit it on your own computer at home. So, the paths, there are more paths and there's probably more competition at that level, but like anything else, the cream always rises to the top. And if you create good material, you'll get discovered, or your career, like Georgia said, will take on a life of its own.
That's great. We're having a lot of questions kind of fly in right now, so I'm going to kind of try to get to some of those. But so Dan Cochran of Holmes County wants to ask, in one of the earlier scenes where the young girl is walking towards the cafeteria, he noticed a posting board with the flyer Holmes County Fair. Because I'm from Holmes County, is there a connection with anyone who worked on the set to Holmes County?
That's
Look,
fun.
Julie, right on the spot with that.
My guess would be, and maybe one of you guys know, but that's probably a local production design or art director or person in the that was creating materials for us got that in there. But I'm glad to know we represented the state and the county well.
Yeah. I agree.
No, there was no connection there. That was the gun show, I believe, is what we shot there.
Yeah.
And I think that was the name of the real place, and it was just perfect for what we needed. In terms of, I mean, it had such a great look as like all those old wooden buildings, and we did have a hard time because had some boats that they were storing in there, and especially, of course, in the spot that the director wanted. So we forced him to compromise and did something that we could do. But it was, it was a great location. Wonderful.
Shanice asks, and I think this is perfect because we have two examples of this. What's the difference between a producer and an executive producer?
Go ahead, Georgia.
Sometimes, well, in the studio system, an executive producer, originally executive producer, the title meant the person who was getting the money for the film, so the financier, and that is sometimes the case. Like, I just watched something yesterday, and Jeff Skoll, who's the head of participant, when he does the movie, he gets the executive producing credit. He's never been on set, or he'll go and visit the set once or twice, like he did on Syriana. But he's not a present producer, and that's what executive producers used to be. This is just in features because television is completely different. But a couple years ago, like when the studio system fell apart and production managers took on a different role, so like my job as a line producer, they needed someone who could be the physical, not just the executive for the studio, but someone who could be on the project itself, who would be that connective tissue between the creative and the practical. And as I think during the time that I have been doing this, so I never got a credit as a line producer. First it was co-producer, and then as you get more experienced, it's pretty much the only credit they can give you, because there's a distinction between like when you say producer, like Scott is a full-fledged producer. So when that film, like if our film had been nominated for the Oscars, the Producers Guild, you have to qualify as a producer. You have to have done the preparation. You have to be involved with the script writing. You have to, or getting the source of material together. Then you have to be involved in the production. You have to be there for a certain percentage of the time. You have to be involved with post-production and cutting, and then you have to be also involved with distribution. And if you cover the gamut, that's really what a creative producer does. So they're from the beginning to the end. So they have a piece of all of that. I normally, like I said, I'm a gun for hire. When they have the project set up, they bring me in. I do my thing, and then they go into post. And it's on a couple of films. On Syriana, I was able to be around for most of post, and we did a lot of shooting during post. And stuff like that. So I did get a producing credit on that, but that's really the distinction. It's really like executive producer if you're a line producer. And the way to tell what someone is to see who's the production manager, because usually line producers are also production managers. So if you look, if you really want to know, like, oh, are they the money people? But you can look them up and see, like, if they own the company, then they're not me who's on set every day. They're running the company. So the executive producer, if it's Daniel Lupi, or there's a bunch of people who are line producers of the studio pictures, and they give us the executive producing credit. I hope that helps.
Oh,
Confusing. It's confusing.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, Georgia, Matthew, thank you so much. We're going to take a very brief commercial break. So I want to pitch it to my boss, Evan Miller.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you again, Scott, Georgia, and Matthew. We really appreciate your involvement tonight and really getting some great questions. So hopefully everybody's enjoying. So as Mike said, my name's Evan Miller. I'm the president of the Greater Cleveland Film Commission. John Wagner, I wanted to thank you as well. Thank our board for all of their involvement, our staff, and Mike for hosting tonight. Really couldn't do it without you. So as John alluded to at the beginning, what the Greater Cleveland Film Commission does, we do a lot of different things. So one of our most important things is connecting local crew, cast, vendors to production work that will be coming or has already started shooting. We do a lot with workforce development, whether it's hosting workshops. We have an online film skills program, which I encourage everyone to check out. And then also internships. We feel it's very important to foster anybody's interest in this business, and any way that we can help plug them into the workforce community, we would like to do so. We also are actively pursuing different media businesses and productions to bring them to Northeast Ohio, TV productions, film productions, anything that's going to come and set up shop here and really create that impact that we talked about earlier. We also are actively advocating for public policy that's going to support not just the tax incentive, but feature film and TV production in general. This is one of the biggest growth industries out there, and we want to see it produced here and see the people of Northeast Ohio getting to have all the benefits from it. And really, at the end of the day, we strive to be the one-stop shop for not just national and international filmmakers, but local filmmakers as well, really to provide whatever assistance we can so that people have the opportunity to make the project that they want to in Northeast Ohio. So as a nonprofit, as John said earlier, we do not receive any money from the productions that come here. Most of this comes via the support of people like yourselves attending. So lots of different ways you can help. One of them is to sign up for film skills online training, which you can get to through our website, clevelandfilm.com. It's a very immersive, very in-depth online film training program that covers everything from how to get your start in acting to how to be a cinematographer, what it takes to be a gaffer, all these different positions you see in the credits and might not know what they are. This program will help you do that. And with people still being stuck at home, now is definitely a good time to check that out. You also can become a Greater Cleveland Film Commission member by signing up and making a donation. In a normal year, we'll have a lot more events, screenings, public events, merchandise, raffles, but still currently it's a great way to stay up to date with what's going on and also just get some unique opportunities, online screenings and whatnot. And then also we're excited to be offering our limited edition Guardian of Film merchandise, sweatshirts, hats, t-shirts. Holiday season's coming up, and we're going to be having this on sale at least through the end of the month. So please go to our website, check these out. I think they make great gifts, and we all know the frigid cold is going to be coming sooner rather than later. Georgia and Matthew, I'm sure you don't miss that one bit. So, and again, we encourage everyone to donate. Every single penny does matter and helps create that economic impact and bring this industry here. So a few of you have already taken advantage of the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom, but if you have a question you want to answer, please go ahead, open that Q&A window, type it in and send it, and someone from our staff is monitoring that, and we'll get that over to Mike Wendt and hopefully get it to the crew. But again, we thank everybody for joining. We thank everybody for their support. There is a light at the end of this tunnel. We do see a lot of production work coming here, hopefully early next year, and getting people back to work. So hopefully we'll be doing something like this in person. So, well, now, even though again not in person, but I will hand it back to my associate and our Swiss Army knife, Mike Wendt. So, thanks again, Mike.
Thank you so much, Evan. And as our guests start to come back in, this is this second half portion is a lot of it. We're going to be relying on your questions, and so all the attendees, if you have any questions, this is your opportunity. You have three very experienced producers here, so ask away. Now, before we get to some of those questions, I just have to ask you three, with COVID right now, obviously it has put a little bit of a wrinkle into a lot of the, production community. I guess if you care to comment, what are some of your experiences right now with any of the projects that potentially you were prepping for or looking forward to doing in the future?
I just wanted to jump in on that real quick. I wanted to piggyback on what Scott said too, in terms of what people can be doing separate from us that are, not so much established, but might have projects in line or ready to go, but more for our audience. But I think what Scott was saying was so true, because, for the students and people listening, right now is the best time, as we were more isolated, at least for myself. I did a lot of development. I started writing more. Try to utilize a different part of my brain versus production. So for us, we had a couple of things up getting ready to go that got pushed. So I implore a lot of the students out there to do what Scott said, basically is, nowadays you have all the resources at your hand for very inexpensive. So write, shoot your own stuff with your friends in your dorm rooms or whatever, obviously being safe, but utilize that time to be creative so that when the time does come, when everything becomes a little bit normalized, that you have some products that you can kind of push out there and, utilize this time to go inward and be creative. I think it's a great time to do that. And in regards to production, I think the most important thing is to be safe. I think there's a lot of great regulations out there. Productions are, getting to move forward a little bit. But again, it's just, staying with those guidelines and just making sure your crew is safe. Number one, you're not putting anybody at harm, and just listening to, the rules and regulations and being smart and making sure that everything is crossed off and it's a safe production. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. Scott or Georgia, anything to add to that? Or?
I mean, look, COVID obviously has been extremely difficult on our industry, and it's been extremely difficult on every industry unless you, I don't know, own a liquor store or a fast food restaurant. So yeah, it's been a lot more development. Some projects have pushed, and there have been some projects. We applied for a tax credit in Cleveland for, to potentially shoot a film in Cleveland. When New York was fully shut down, but Cleveland was still up and running. But, I have one film that we're considering making as an animated film instead of live action, because it just seems like it might be years before we can make it as a live action film in this world. But, look, you have the most creative industry in the world and the most creative people within this industry in the world. And, I think that everybody's doing a pretty good job navigating it and figuring out, how we're going to get through it and when we can make films safely and adapting. And, it's sad. I mean, you see some films that may never happen and others that have to get rewritten because they can't even be shot in or filmed in a COVID safe way. So, it's been tough, but I think the industry will come out stronger than ever through it, or as strong as ever. I don't know if it'll ever be stronger than ever, but yeah, it's just, we're all in a little bit of a wait and see pattern in every industry, which is tough, but we'll get through it.
Absolutely. So we have Carol Oppenheim is asking, any suggestions for what we in the Cleveland film community can do to make the process smoother for producers when considering to come here?
Well, I mean, for one, I think that, I think Cleveland's done a great job. First, on the financial side, I think Cleveland's done a great job with instituting a tax credit a few years ago. but maybe not many people know this. It is somewhat limited. And I can share this because I think it'd be good because I'm sure it helps your guys' goals at the Cleveland Film Commission. I think if everybody on here could get involved with getting with the state and local politicians to lobby and try and push them to raise the tax credit limit and raise the amount that can go to a film. And right now I think it's $25 million a year. And I know in last quarter the whole 25 million went to one film. So and that's just the kind of the luck of the draw. So I think for one, the more money that we have per quarter and per year for your tax credits, the more films that can come there. And then I think that, I think to make it smooth, I think, look, we were an early film as far as Cleveland's growth in the film industry. So I think we did have to bring more out of town crew than we would have liked. But I think it's for people to get experience making films any way that they can, and be that making their own films and learning what it takes and trying to get jobs on other films. And if they have to travel a little bit to just, working and continuing with film school and film education, so that you can have as many local tradespeople as you possibly can have. That would make things smoother. But I have to say, other than that, the city of Cleveland and the state of Ohio made it incredibly smooth for all of the logistical things that we needed: finding offices, finding housing, finding hotels, finding locations, closing roads when we needed. The city it couldn't have been smoother. It was one of the most, possibly the most film-friendly city that I may have ever shot in. So, to that, for a young city in the industry, kudos. So I think just continuing to grow the local talent base and do whatever you guys can to get the politicians to raise the tax credits are probably the two things that would help Cleveland thrive that much more.
I agree with
I'm going to immediately send that to our state representatives right now.
There you go.
But Matthew, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I agree with you. I was just going to piggyback on what Scott said, but more, he nailed it, but I was going to say more on the creative side for anybody. For me, especially, I'm working on a project that is based in Ohio. It's going to be a scripted television show. So I suggest for any of the creatives out there, other than the business side, because the business side is a little bit different based on if the tax credits are available or timing, especially due to COVID and our climate right now. But the creative side is, I implore again, the creatives out there to, there's so many great stories out there. There's so many inventors out of Ohio. There's so many great stories that do take place in Ohio. So I think, if you look at that well that you can draw from creatively, you find stories that, do take place in Ohio. They don't always have to. Obviously, our story took place in Detroit, but if you find a homegrown story, which there are a lot of beautiful stories that took place in Ohio over decades, that's a great way to, supply a creative story that's homegrown that then you can kind of push into the pipeline, where I think people will get behind something that is powerful creatively, but also kind of supports the local community. And then you get a little bit more support that way. That's just the creative push that I think can help as well.
That's great. So we also have another question here. So as a writer, what is the best route to have your script considered for production? And a follow-up is the best resources to find screenplays that you want to produce.
I guess that's me. For me as a creative producer, it's been fewer and further between than I would have liked, and that's only because most of the films that I've produced we've developed in-house, and I have worked with a small selected group of filmmakers, but a lot of them get submitted to us through our agency. But there are also, so many screenwriting labs that are out there. There's the Sundance Lab. There are online screenwriting competitions. There's the Blacklist. So, I would first, as a screenwriter, I would try to take your screenplay and get it submitted to as many of those screenwriter labs and contests as possible, because you know what, whether you know it or not, they all get read. If you submit a screenplay to the Sundance Lab, it gets read. Whether you get in or not is another question, but that'll be an indication alone of whether you need to do some more work on that or not. And, what I found is, some of the best way to learn to write screenplays is to read as many of them as possible. Read your favorite movie screenplays. Read some of the movies that are in the film screenplays for some of the films in the top 100, top 200 films of all time, and by some of the best screenwriters in history, because they give you sure, there are tons of screenwriting books out there, but reading quality screenplays is the best way to, in my opinion, to learn how to hone and sharpen your own writing skills if you don't win any of those contests or get into any of those labs. But I would research all those contests and labs and write as much as you can and read as many of them as you can. And, you'll learn structure, you'll learn, be it the 3-act structure, be it the writer's journey and different, protagonists and antagonists. I mean, whether you know the terms of them or not, I'm sure, if you read the right books along with those screenplays, you will, but you'll see a pattern in many of those screenplays that is not that difficult to code to crack if you continue to write yourself as you're reading and hone your skills.
We've had a couple people ask about this, and I understand when cutting together a film, you can't use everything that was shot, but there is this sequence that was shot at Tower City, the people mover scene. I guess there's certain decisions that have to be made creatively, but why do some scenes get cut that a lot of time and energy might get spent
on? There's a number of reasons. I mean, look, those are some of the hardest decisions to make. You love a scene, but you have to fit it into a certain running time, or you have to get to a certain plot point. If your big scene that you don't want to lose is in the first act, and your first act is dragging it, but it might be a great scene, but it doesn't drive the story forward. And while it's a great scene, it makes the rest of the film lag. I mean, there's tons of reasons, but yeah, the more you have to work with, and the more I've always found, the more you have to cut, and the more of those hard decisions you have to make, the more thought you put into that process, and the better your film will be. And that comes to the screenwriting process as well. I mean, sometimes you get a screenplay that's 140 pages and you can't decide what to cut, or if you get a screenplay and, you have to make it for, $22 million. And right now it's coming in at 35. And, in our case, we had to cut, an action scene, and that hurt. But making those really, really difficult decisions, and it's often some of the scenes you like best in the movie that you have to cut, and they're the hardest decisions to make, but they often make the film that much better.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's my experience that the biggest scene in the film usually gets cut. So whatever is the most expensive to make, whatever is the most difficult to do, I mean, it's happened on every single film I've ever worked on. And it's just amazing to me, and so now when I get to the point where I can isolate like how much that scene is going to cost, I go for it, and I automatically start to dissect it with the director and make sure, and then and just because I know that it's going to get cut anyway, I figure out ways to make it as cheap and as painless as possible, even though 99% of the time, it's still more expensive than any other scene in the movie, and it will get cut. This movie, we actually could have probably made this movie for 25 million because we did cut everything that cost a lot of money, except a few examples. But and I think it was just Jan's vision. He loved the script and he wanted to shoot the script, so we shot the script. But I think when he got in the cutting room, because he's such an intuitive director, if you look at 71, you can see like the story doesn't really have like a big political, it takes place in a highly politicized arena, but it's the emotional world of the Irish Troubles. It's not a specific story about a specific thing that happened. And I think when he got into this story, I think it was, it's a very European thing. Like it was, if he'd been an American director, he would have absolutely concentrated on the technicality of what happened. He would have brought the mayor in. He would have, he would have done that. But I think his European sensibility just went for what is this kid going through? Emotionally, what are the beats that the kid is going through? And that's what he focused on. And sadly for us, so much of the expensive stuff just got cut, right away. And I do actually think we probably could have made the movie for a lot less if he had made those decisions, in prep. But
and to his credit, when you look at the story of this movie and the fact that it's a true story, and like we said earlier, what Rick Wershe went through and the tragedy of it, and Yan wanting to make a movie very much about that and a father-son story, anyone could have taken this story and just gone for the wannabe gangster movie, which we've seen 500 times, and it would not, sure, I think Yan might have done it better than most have, but it's a movie we've seen before. So, when you realize that, you can lose a lot of those things. And when your goal is to make that emotional drama and the father-son story, and you look at those big expensive scenes, like, okay, I can lose one big expensive scene that doesn't really tell that story, although it's cool, or I could lose 4 of the scenes that do tell that story and keep this one in. And now you've just kept 1 for 4, and now you're down 5 scenes that are telling the story that you want to tell. And those are the decisions that I'm talking about that are really hard to make as a screenwriter or as a director or as a producer. But, when you make the right decision and the hard decision, you usually end up with a better film.
So Jim Warren, who worked in the art department, asks, what was the most challenging day of filming, or was there any particular moments that were more challenging than others?
Georgia?
Can
we write down our answers and see if we all have the same one?
I literally think that because Richie was a minor and we had limited hours with him, every day felt like a challenge. It really was. And we, our first AD was one of those guys who actually comes out of the commercial world, and his, because of that training, he's got one day to get the commercial shot, and he comes out and he's yelling and screaming and pulling it all together, and he's getting through that day, and he will get you to the end of the day. And that's what we needed every day, because we were always looking at, like, okay, how are we going to fit? Because we had large page counts in each day of filming, and he really did a great job of just hammering through, like, what's our next shot, let's go, and he really got us through. So every day was a nail biter because of the kids' hours. And logistically, I think our day in Detroit was probably the most difficult day, where we spent the most money, we did the most overtime, and we ran around like crazy trying to get stuff that we thought we needed. But yeah, every day was a toughie.
Yeah, and combining that, also much to Richie's credit as a minor and his first time being an actor and being able to plow through those big page count scenes along with the 8-day pushing, that definitely saved us. But in addition to Detroit, any day we had to take the challenge of those forced shortened hours, and where Richie was in those scenes, and you combine them with a stunt or a gag like the snowy car crash, and when it was too warm for snow, and we're crashing a car into a ditch. That was the toughest day in Ohio, I think.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
I concur with both Scott and Georgia pretty much on all. Other than, and Detroit was pretty cold that day too. That was lovely. I don't think we were well prepared for that day.
Now we have a couple questions here about casting and everything, and I think one of the great things about that film was you guys got a lot of veterans like McConaughey and Bruce Dern and Jennifer Jason Leigh, but you also almost like had the foresight of having like a Jonathan Majors, who's now on Lovecraft Country and everything. It's, I guess, can you talk a little bit about the do you as the producers have a lot of say in the casting. And were you able to find, one of the questions was, were you able to find any local actors to have some of those speaking parts as well?
In the independent film world where this film lives, we do have some say in the casting, but I think it's more supporting the director's vision. The director definitely has the final say in the casting, but most directors work with producers they like and trust and value their opinions in the casting. Often sometimes you may have to cast an actor or two, which wasn't really our case to get the financing in the independent path. So some of the casting is financier driven. But I think this, Jan was a great collaborator when it came to casting, but ultimately in independent film, casting is the director's decision. I mean, he's the one who has to make that actor sing on camera. And by sing, I mean, act and perform. So you defer to Jan in that.
Liz Conway is asking, you each spoke about the many hats that you have to wear as producers. Which hat do you find easiest to put on, and which ones are the hardest ones to wear?
The one where you're at the premiere. That's easy. I think they're all equally challenging for me, but I think that's the point where it's fun. If you work with people like Scott and Georgia and Lesh and Yen, it's just a warm community on set. So even though you're going through challenges, I don't remember any heated moments and everybody just trying to really help each other out. So I think they're all challenging, to be honest with you. I don't know if you're struggling last minute to find, a location, if you're struggling last minute because you're hemorrhaging money for a moment, or the weather is not permitting or working in your favor. I think you just try to put a smile on your face, and you just try to, you try not to panic, but meanwhile, we're the ones panicking when the day is done. And we always have the late nights. Scott and I had the pleasure and privilege of living together for a few months. So we would always, next to the director, so we would always have our late night conversations and just kind of post-mortem after the days. So our days really never ended. So they all blended together. So I guess without rambling on, I think, I don't know if there was an easier position or tougher, whether you're a producer or, whatever your position was. I think Georgia was really our glue, keeping all of our maniacs together, all of us maniacs. But yeah, I think every hat that you wore every day, you just showed up on set, and if there was a problem, you try to fix it and just move on. So for me, it was all challenging and all rewarding for me.
All right, we have another question here. Drew Stelzer asks, how do you overcome low points in your career?
On to the next. Look, you just pick up and work on the next film. I've definitely had films that I thought would be far more well received or successful than they were, but at the same time, I'm extremely proud of. So you just move on.
And for me,
I think
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, George.
Go ahead, Matthew. No, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I think the good thing about the film industry is just that every project is a little circle. You start it and eventually you finish it. So if you're having a bad time on it, or if it's something that you think has hurt your career, there's usually a reason for that. It was the wrong combination of people or whatever. But as long as as long as you can get back into it and not be scarred by whatever the experience is, and then maybe you go back and the next one you do with people and trust, and that it works with them, so that you can get back on your feet. Because I've met great people who have worked together, like one person is great, this person is great, and it just doesn't work, because it's a real people-based industry. And the people who get you have to be someone who's flexible and gets along with people just to be in the industry, just to start. You got to have some pretty strong sense of yourself, and and be able to get along and work collaboratively. But even then, I've seen great people just not be able to make it work. So you just got to get over it, and it will end. And when it ends, you take a little care of yourself, and then you get the next job. You can't dwell on it.
I agree 100% with Georgia and Scott. So I think I answered this kind of earlier in a very short snip, but I think for me, on my low point in my career is when I personally took a break. I would not suggest that to most people, but again, like I said, it bit me in a good way. So I came back refreshed during that low point, so I could actually continue. But I think it's perseverance, and I think it's just finding the right people to work with if you get lucky enough. And when you come back and then you get a chance to work with people like Georgia and Scott and have a production like this, then it makes it all worth it, and it gets you excited again. And then you realize what you're doing. And we're lucky enough to work in this business because it is a very select few that get a chance to be successful and get a chance to keep working in this creative industry. And it's an amazing business. And if it works well, it's great. So I think it's perseverance, and you just have to, like Georgia said, just keep moving forward and keep making movies, and hopefully they're successful. But not only is it box office, but it's how is your experience, and building relationships and being able to work with the same people again if you get a chance. So I think it's all, hopefully looking for a positive experience at the end and trying to do your best part.
So we have a question from Jeff, and I know Scott kind of alluded to this, and I know Matthew, you already kind of have a foot here in Ohio, but are any of you potentially considering any projects in the future here in Ohio?
Yeah, if you don't give the tax credit all to one film.
Did Evan jump off for that one? I bet he did.
That's all a state thing. Yeah. But no, that's a great.
I'm just kidding. I'm only kidding. Yes, absolutely. I mean, you just never know where you're going to land. There's so many, unless a film actually takes place in Ohio and you need Ohio as its actual backdrop, it's hard to know where you're going to land. I mean, look, for White Boy Rick, even like we said, we considered Detroit, we considered Cleveland, we considered Pittsburgh for some time. We kind of end up chasing the tax credits, and that aspect of it does kind of, for lack of a better term, that having to do that sucks. I mean, none of us want to do that. None of us like doing that, but there's a lot of factors that go into making sense where a film shoots. And I submitted a film to Cleveland, and I'll probably submit it again because it ended up pushing anyway because of COVID. I will definitely say, I could say it won't be my fault if another one of my films don't land in Cleveland. I'd love to shoot there again. I love the city. I love the people. I love, the locations and the architecture. It's like its own backlot, but there's so many reasons why a film ends up in a place. We could have a film that's targeted to Cleveland. We're going to Cleveland, and a week before we end up in Cleveland, we're in Atlanta. And that's just, we get driven by actors. Sometimes, if the movie star was key in getting the financing and, they want to stay close to home, or they can't travel, or for some reason, so many snafus come along that can kind of, torpedo your plan. So I can say that if it were up to me and for what a part of it is up to me, I do plan on being in Cleveland again.
Yeah, I was contacted recently about a show that's going to shoot in Ohio, not in Cleveland. It's a rural location mostly, but it's not the right picture for me at this time. But I always encourage people, so just know that I'm out there telling people to go and give it a try.
Thank you.
For me, Mike, yeah, I have one specific one that is just getting close, and that would be definitely based in Ohio. And then there's another one on the horizon. But yeah, we're looking. Unfortunately, like Scott said too, and Georgia, it's like it just depends on what's going on with COVID. But I mean, ours takes place in Ohio, so for us, the only choice is really shoot in Ohio. So hopefully, with the tax credits in line, and if everything, like I said before, is a perfect marriage, we can get it done next year. If not, it'll be in the next, hopefully for 2022. But yeah, there are a few that are on my target for sure, on my radar, that would like to be shot in Ohio. So.
Perfect. We have a question from Becca Kravitz, who says, what is your dream industry look like moving forward, and how are you working towards that new vision?
Scott?
I'm not even first on all of them. My dream industry is, 1996 box office, less streaming services, bigger budgets, and crowded theaters and movies in the theaters for 12-week runs. That's my dream. I don't think that'll ever happen again. So I think that the fun and exciting thing about our industry is, in truth, there's nothing we can do to get our business to be our dream version of itself. But I think what we can do is bless and welcome all of the changes, because from the day I've gotten into this industry and really understood it, it's changed, and it's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And a lot of the things that nobody likes change. Nobody likes new things. And you resist them at first. And then when you learn to understand them and embrace them and use them as tools, I think you just have to embrace it and adapt to it, and utilize all the resources you have at your disposal. While it might not be the number one format of how you want your movie to be seen, but you have more opportunities to have your films be seen. And you have more opportunities for more films to be seen. And people are absorbing films and taking in films, and now, series and in larger volumes than ever. So, that I don't think the audience has gotten smaller. I think that, the way they watch films has changed, but as long as people want to watch movies and need to watch movies and escape, we'll always have an industry. So I think that's worth embracing. And look, I mean, you just look at when we were all quarantined. I mean, what did people turn to? Everybody turned to movies and short form series and episodic, and just gobbling up whatever format we could. So that's something that's as long as we always have that, I think we'll be happy.
I agree with Scott too. I think the silver lining after all this too, at least in the creative world, is that, I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but we had gone through so much content being locked down for so long. So the need to watch new content, so that has emerged on every level on the platform issue. So I think it's very positive, because, I think, at least for me, speak for myself, I've watched everything going back to the 80s till now and binge watched everything. So I'm excited for new content. And I think that made a lot of creatives out there start really cranking out, new ideas and new forms, and really looking at the climate and the political world. And I think everybody got a chance to go inward. So I'm excited to see what people came up with, creatively. And now, like Scott said, there's a lot of different platforms. So I think it's a good time over the next couple of years for the entertainment business, for all these creative minds to get together and figure out, what stories are there to be told. And I think we're I think we do have a duty too, as storytellers, to kind of to do that, for audiences, because, we do need to be entertained. We do need to have some good stories out there. We need to laugh more. I'm not a big horror fan. I don't know if I want to see many more horror movies right now, but I think we have a duty to put out great content, and I think that's great. So I think the world's providing that for us. So I am a ever optimist on the business moving forward. My 2 cents. Georgia?
Yeah, and I really just look forward to a time when the technology of, for lighting, I mean, they promised us these these LED lights, and they were so easy, just plug them in and they're beautiful. I mean, we're still not using them. That was 20 years ago. It's like, please give us tools that are not so cumbersome, so that, we can spend less money making more of a movie than, filmmaking is still very cumbersome. And I would love to see it get a little bit faster. I mean, digital cameras are great, but then you got a guy in the tent. I mean, there's just still so much that makes it the slowest, most painful process. And I don't know why, it can't, some of this technology can't become cheap enough for us to use all the time, and let's cut our schedules in half, so the films aren't as expensive and easier to recoup, your money. And, and people have been watching so much TV that they don't really care about the cinematography can be a little more, a little less perfect. And, people are looking for content. They're looking for something to react to, in the format, in the COVID era. So personally, I just want the technology to move a little bit faster, so it could be cheaper and better.
And look, and the more people are watching at home and on small screens and on their phones and their iPads and their laptops and their TVs at home. I mean, to the audience, it feels like it's less important. But look, I mean, we do also have an industry of artists and perfectionists, and we all love and appreciate and respect that art and craft as well. So but I agree to get the technology moving to a point where all that can be done faster and those artists can accomplish what they're looking for faster would be great, because even the artists, they know what they want it to look like at first, and they're most of them, the ones that I worked with, are fully ready to embrace the faster and easier technology.
Absolutely.
So we have a few more questions here because we have less than 10 minutes left. And once again, we can't thank you enough for your time today. The question is there a certain kind of budgeting software or any software that you suggest for any of these up and coming producers to use to help budget the projects?
Georgia, you're the queen.
The budget queen. Movie Magic is Entertainment Partners is a payroll company, actually, and they bought this software called Movie Magic, and that's the industry standard. So if you look up Entertainment Partners, and it'll take you to, or you can look up Movie Magic, and the budgeting and the scheduling. And then they also have the accounting software that all ties in together. So those are, and they have tutorials online that you can start to learn. I'm sure there's some books that talk about how to break down scripts and do all that stuff. And, because you need a schedule to do a budget. So they go hand in hand, and they exist. Yeah. So Movie Magic, I've been using it since it was, the first computers I ever had where a script took 10 discs, every 10 pages per disc, that was my first Apple computer. So it's been around for a long time. And yes, it's out there.
Aside from White Boy Rick, of course, is, and each of you has a very diverse, filmography. Is there a favorite project that you have that you've done over the years?
They all have a special place, and it's not just based on the success of it. I mean, recently I did the movie Mother, which didn't do very well at the box office, but it's one of the favorite movies I've ever made. I think creatively and directorially it's as close to a masterpiece as you can get. But that's me. The Wrestler will always have a special place in my heart because it's the first movie that I produced on my own. And it was just, we made, and it was the lowest budget film that I produced. It was made for $7 million and it was, or $6 million. And it was just an incredible experience. And just a fun wave to ride. They're all special. Black Swan, was obviously, and White Boy Rick. I loved making White Boy Rick. I loved working with different creative people. Which is stepping out of the comfort zone and the creative think tank that I've lived in for so many years. And so that was a blast, and it's one of my favorite films I've made. So. And I can go on. I could tell you something special about each one of the films that I've made, and we're going back to Hound Dog. So it's hard to just choose one for me because and maybe that's because I live with every one of them from or most of them from the inception of developing the screenplay all the way through post and marketing and the release. So, they really do live with you from birth to when they leave the house. So yeah, that's
for me. I think White Boy Rick was special for me just because of the challenges. Also being able to make the film with one of my best friends, Scott, and that was a really fun, challenging experience, which was, unique to be able to make a movie with one of your good friends, and then being able to meet Georgia and work with such a professional like her, and her filmography is obviously ridiculously extensive, and it was a blast. And so for me, White Boy Rick was one of the favorite projects I've ever worked on in my life. And because we knew we had a duty to Rick, who was in jail, and obviously he got out this year in July, so he's out of prison now. So it just felt right, and it was beautiful. I think the most challenging film I did recently, I just started my writing and directorial debut. So I did a documentary in Africa, and it was just me and a small crew, and that was it. So we didn't have much pressure other than the pressure I put on myself. So that was unique. So I want to kind of go down that road a little bit more and try to use a different skill set. But still to this day, I think my favorite project is worked on with these fine people right here. So,
Georgia?
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, I there are so many. I agree with Scott. It's kind of like you're in such a different. I mean, we're not like technicians who get hired for 30 days of a shoot or 50 days of a shoot. And I mean, sometimes I look at people's resumes. I'm like, oh my God, this person worked on 6 movies this year, or 10, or whatever. We only do. Scott, because and Matthew, because of the prep that they do and the post that they do, it can be a long time between projects, and we don't have as many movies as some people who are in the industry who just are, cranking them out. I'm the same way, and I've at certain points in my life had to wait for projects too. So I don't have that many films. So each one has something, whether it's just getting to work with a genius director or working on a funny comedy. I love comedies. I'm about to get involved in my first rom-com, which I've never done before, but apparently the COVID audience wants more rom-coms, and this is a really well-written one with a great group of people. I'm going to embrace it and have a great time. So every project just has, and I guess the ones that are the most important are the ones that are real milestones. And most of them are milestones. But like I said, like the jump from a Soderbergh to Casino, the working in 3D, with Marty on Hugo, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was hugely challenging. The Hateful Eight also, shooting a movie in the snow, so every time you're learning something that's really radically new. I did a surfing movie once. I mean, it was like, I didn't know anything about surfing, but I learned a lot about surfing. And it's just like every movie has a place in your heart. And I think that's the joy of really being able to find something in your career to hold on to give you a through line, so that each project you do is taking you someplace you want to go. And I think that's the pleasure I've had in my career, is just that I've been able to just keep moving to different, doing different kinds of things and having different experiences. And it's, that's what makes this life as crazy as it can be, and as gypsy-like as our lives can be sometimes, just picking up and going away for months and months at a time. That's the payoff, is that you're kind of living, so many different experiences, that most people don't have when they just have a full-time job. So it's fun in that way.
Well, we are at the end of our time. So Scott, Georgia, Matthew, I think myself and behalf of a lot of the cast and crew who got to work on White Boy Rick, thank you so much for bringing this project here. And thank you so much for your insight today. I think, everybody has walked away with a lot of different knowledge. So we're going to wrap this up. I want to kick it to one of our board members, Amy Haught. to wrap it out for us. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Hott, and I'm on the board for the Greater Cleveland Film Commission. What a great event. Wow. I'm just, what great insight and advice that you guys have given. Thank you, Mike. And of course, thank you, Matthew, Georgia, and Scott for spending this time with us tonight. And most importantly, thank you so much to our viewers tonight and for your support and your really great questions. They were wonderful. And one last time, please go to clevelandfilm.com to donate or purchase some of the Guardian of Film merchandise. I bought the hoodie, it's really cool. So to help us in our efforts to bring jobs to Cleveland. Thank you and good night.